Hey everyone, I'm Angela Lynn.
And I'm Jesse Lynn, and welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From? This week, we're putting Angela in the hot seat again. I will be the interviewer, and she will be the interviewee as we dive into the world of past life regression. So we've definitely, yeah, woo, woo, woo. We've definitely talked a lot about like spirituality and exploring all of that. So Angela recently did a deeper dive. I don't know if deeper dive is the right word. A deeper dive, I guess, into that by going to have her past life regressed so that she has knowledge of it. I'm not sure if that's the correct way to term it, but maybe I'll kick it over to you for you to explain what past life regression is for those of our listeners who don't know what it is.
Yeah, so basically, it's like hypnotherapy. So I think most people have heard of hypnotherapy, aka using hypnosis as a form of therapy. So it's like, this is commonly used for people who have any sort of like trauma that they're trying to kind of overcome, or like sometimes police forces use hypnotherapists to on like potential witnesses of crimes to try to like dig up memories
Wait,
that maybe,
really?
yeah.
I didn't
Although
know
it's a
that.
little like
That just sounds inadmissible.
no, well, it's kind of like the gray area because
Okay.
people argue that sometimes they feel like the memories could be manipulated, like maybe it was like planted a memory or whatever, but like theoretically the idea is that when you're under hypnosis, you're not kind of like bogged down by the exterior things, and like we as humans do repress a lot of memories to kind of like protect ourselves, especially from trauma. So it makes sense that like if you remove that layer of like self-awareness, of like waking life, quote unquote, right, and when you're in this hypnotic state, then like you should theoretically be able to remember more things than like your normal conscious mind would. So that's like normal hypnotherapy. And so, like, oftentimes these are going to like the past, right? Or I think all the time they're going into the past of like things that happened. So, like, I guess the easiest way to think about it is like you're going so far in the past that you're like going into a life that isn't your current life. So it is only like certain therapists actually are specialized in doing this, but it is slightly different because you're not trying to like focus on your current life. You're trying to take you out of like this self and find like other past versions of yourselves and the experiences and memories that you have from that. And it is to help you like learn more about yourself, and also like maybe there are blockages that you carry into your current life because of things that happened in the past in other lives. That's the theory. And something, well, I'll bring like two extra pieces of color into this. One is like, we mentioned that we previously talked about spirituality, and like in that first episode we talked about religion, spirituality. I mentioned that one of the books that like really made a big impact on me was one called Journey of Souls, and that was written by a hypnotherapist named Dr. Michael Newton. He already passed away, but before he passed away, he had created this institute to teach his method of past life regression and this other regression called Life Between Lives, which we can get into if we want, but whatever. Anyways, so he had created this institute to teach his method. And so at the time, I remember you asking me, like, would you ever do that? And I was like, no, I'm so scared. I don't know what I would dig up. And at the time, I did believe that, but I think like enough things had happened since that point. Like I did a lot of psychedelic since that point, and like I've done a lot more work on like self growth and blah blah, that I was more open to the idea. But I wanted to find someone who was affiliated with that institute if I couldn't do it with Michael Newton himself because he already passed away. So that was kind of like, okay, this is like where it comes full circle. It's like that book changed my perception of things, and I wanted to kind of like dig into that with someone affiliated with him. And then the other piece is that the woman that I ended up doing this session with, her website, her whole like spiel, something I really liked was that basically, like, everyone's on a different spectrum of the woo woo factor, right? Like how much you believe in like spirituality and blah blah, soul, life, all of that, past lives, reincarnation. And it doesn't really matter. Like her thesis was like whether or not you believe that this stuff was real. Like you could believe that this is all just like made up imaginary shit that your brain made up, kind of like dreaming, right? Like you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna like make up things. But she's like, who cares? Because if in the end, what you experience and what we work through in that session helps you unblock something that is holding you back in your current life, does it really matter if it was real or not? So, like, that's the interpretation for the skeptics, right? And obviously, for like people like me who do believe that this shit is real, then it's like I have additional benefits that I get from it. But at the most skeptic level, that's kind of her sell. It's like, what do you have to lose? Like, if you've had like chronic pain or like this fear that you can't understand why you have this fear, or like aversion to something, and then we discover something in the session and you are able to overcome it, does it matter if you believed that it was real or not? Like that past life, if you're cured of the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting point because what's that other book that we both read that we like by Michael
How to change your
Pollan?
mind.
Yeah, How to Change Your Mind. And
Yeah.
there was a part of it where it was like somebody was taking mushrooms for kind of palliative care. And even though this person was strictly an atheist, he still, there was some kind of spiritual element of taking that helped him pass or make peace with the fact that he was going to pass. So there, yeah, it's interesting that there is this placebo effect, if you want to call it that. I do want to make two completely off topic comments. We are ketchup and mustard colored, and your eye makeup looks really good today. I
Oh,
love
thank you.
it. You're
I think
welcome.
I extra winged it today, maybe.
It looks really
So
nice.
thank you. We are
You're welcome.
ketchup and
Okay.
mustard. What happened?
It was
Look,
not coordinated, y'all.
no.
Okay, so you mentioned your previous experiences with psychedelics opened you up to do this kind of experience, but what was the impetus behind it? Like, why did you actually want to go and do the past life regression?
Well, I was always interested in it, as we discussed, but I think, um, like, I had had multiple recent psychedelic therapeutic experiences leading up to my decision to, like, want to book a session that kind of open that door. So I actually booked, so I did the session and Ramon did the session as well, a separate session, same day though, in February. But I booked the sessions in like November or December. So we had done two back to back. I think I talked about this in the most recent psychedelics episode, but I did two back to back psychedelic things in like 2 days. One was like the mushrooms or psilocybin and Thai massage mix thing, and then the next day was like a ketamine breathwork session. And in both of those sessions, I was exploring a lot of things, as one does in psychedelics. But for me, a big part was kind of like loss of identity or like retransforming my identity, because it was around the time that I was going to be quitting my corporate job and like transitioning to full time on this and like future with family and blah blah blah. And it was like it rocked me pretty deeply, right? Of like, who am I if not like my default is like I'm a marketer, like I work at this company, like that's like my identity. And so it was like, what am I without that? And I worked through a lot of stuff in those sessions, but there were definite moments in both sessions where I was like trying to get more clarity on like, for example, with this podcast, right? I was like, I generally like have a good like vision for what I want us to do with it, but I was trying to get like more details, right? I was like, can you give me like more specifics about like what I should be doing beyond this like general direction? And I was getting kind of like blanks where like specifically remember during the ketamine session, there was one like really visual kind of moment where it was almost like quicksand and like mud that was like moving, very actively moving. and there was like a huge spotlight over it, like a searchlight. And it was kind of like, okay, what am I looking for? What am I looking for? And then there was like, it just like never found anything. And so the like message that came through to me was like, because it was right after I asked the questions about like, what am I, give me more specifics about like what I'm supposed to do career wise or podcast wise, blah, blah, blah. And the message I got from that was like, we're not going to tell you. Like, there's more to be had here, but it's on you to figure that out. And I think I mentioned this with like also why I was on board to do the Vipassana meditation retreat. But we talked about that. That was not what I got out of that meditation retreat at all. Like, it wasn't, the point was not to self reflect. So I didn't get those answers. So I think it was just like I had already been primed to be like, okay, the question is still there. It's on me to discover this. What other like drastic, if you will, ways can I like force myself to find the answers to these things? Like, how can I open myself up in other ways? So I think it just like lent itself to having me finally be ready to like explore that kind of past life regression that I was already interested in but was kind of afraid to do previously. But I think at that point I was like, I've done so much stuff already. Like, what do I have to be afraid of with this if I
Yeah.
feel that there's value to be had?
So was it kind of like you were hoping to look back at your past lives, what they were doing or what their characteristics were like in order to try to inform your future decision, or what was the kind
Sorry,
of...
no. It was kind of like a convoluted answer. So I didn't actually go into the past life session to answer that question, but because I had all of these like really intense therapeutic self-growth experiences leading up, um I was open to the idea of like trying more different like extreme
Okay.
self-growth
Okay.
things. But yeah, it's not like you can search to the past necessarily
Yeah.
to know what you should do in the future. It was more like that. I think that's why I did the Vipassana, which didn't end up giving me the answers I was hoping for, but it was still like a really great experience. I don't regret anything about. But then I was just like, my mind was more open to like trying different things that I've been interested in anyway.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. So I guess walk us through the process of past life regression, kind of just like the logistics of it. Was signing up for it difficult? Did you have to do any kind of prep work? Anything before even actually getting into the session with the hypnotherapist?
Yeah, well, I do want to caveat that, like, similar to if you're considering psychedelic therapies or anything like this, like, do your research because, like, you're putting yourself in other people's hands to, like, get really vulnerable with. And, like, if you don't know them prior, they're essentially strangers. So, like, that's a big reason why I wanted to find someone who was affiliated with the Michael Newton Institute already, so that I felt a like better sense of security with this person. So I would say the first step was like I did a lot of research to find the right person. So I found this woman in Washington. We happened to be going to that state anyway in February for a work retreat slash vacation situation. And I had read it was kind of a mix of like she was in the directory of like she graduated from, she was like certified through this institute, and also she had like Google and Yelp reviews of like recent ones of people being like, I just had my session like last week or whatever and like changed my life, blah blah blah. So I was like, okay, she seems cool. And I went on her website, watched videos of her talking and stuff, and it was like, okay, this seems like legit. Um, she was hard to book. I don't know if this is just like her or like everyone who does this kind of stuff, but she must be very good. It's probably why she's like hard to book because yeah, I booked in like November, December, and like February. Honestly, like when I reached out to her, she was like, I don't really have openings till like March or April. And I was like, well, we're going to be in Washington. We're not permanently in Washington usually. We're going to be there in February. Is there any way you can like slot us in? And she like did us a favor essentially to like move
Oh,
us
nice.
up.
Nice.
And I can talk about this if you want later, but the other thing I mentioned, the Life Between Lives, is like a slightly different version of this. And I booked it with her as a follow up in August, but I booked it like a month ago. She's like so booked. She's like,
Wait, but you are not going to be here in August, right?
no, but she actually does Zoom now.
Oh, okay.
She tried to make us do Zoom for the past life one, but I was like, I don't even know you yet. I want to like, I
Yeah.
prefer an in person.
Yeah.
And then after we did it in person, I was like, okay, I like vibe with you and I could like see it.
Got it.
Yeah, she's shifting everything to Zoom now.
So the value extraction from the sessions don't have to be consecutive, basically. You can extract value from just having a singular session with the hypnotherapist.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yes. It
Cool.
could be singular or it could be recurring. It's kind of up to you, or not recurring, but like multiple. It depends on what you're trying to work on. So, like, you just like with psychedelics, you need to come in with like some sort of intention of like what you're trying to explore, so that it can better focus what you're like, which past lives. So, like the thesis, right? Like, whether you believe it or not, thesis is that every soul reincarnates like almost countless times, not really countless, but like a lot of times to try to like perfect yourself. And so like there are a lot of past lives that you could be drawing from. So if you just kind of go in of like, I just want to see, like, who knows what you'll end up
Mhm.
exploring. But
Yeah.
if you're like, for example, if this is not what I explored, but if I was like, what's up with my fear of water?
Hmm.
Like, do I have a
Oh, oh,
deeper thing? I have like a specific memory from when I was 13, but like maybe there's
yeah.
a deeper thing that's like
Yeah.
impacting that. Then, the past lives that I would be exploring would be only the ones like relevant to that, as opposed
Got
to
it.
like just like any old thing. Um, so you have to go in with intentions. Going back to your question, prep work. Yes, she had some prep work. Basically, like I'd never been hypnotized before, so there
Hmm.
is a
Hmm.
little bit of prep work prior where she has some videos where essentially it's her voice over like calming music and it's you practicing being hypnotized. You can apparently do like self hypnosis, which is what those recordings are, because you're kind of triggering yourself to be hypnotized. And it was kind of crazy because I was like, oh, I did it. Like, whoa. Because even in her recording, she was like, even if you like don't meet with me anymore, like self hypnosis is a really like strong tool to have because you can essentially like relax yourself, like get yourself out of your head and like just stresses of daily life for like few minutes at a time, up to 20 minutes or less. It's almost like meditation, but like different. So she had us fill in forms of like what we want to explore, and then also listen and practice to like three, I think, videos of self hypnosis, so that ultimately it's easier when you're in the session with her to be hypnotized. And the point being, your time is limited. You're spending money on this shit also. So like you want to be able to get as deep as possible. And if it takes you too long to like relax to be hypnotized, because ultimately hypnosis, you're still awake and you're still aware of everything. So you're just letting your body get as relaxed as possible that it can like shut down the like normal stuff and just focus on like brain, like connecting with her voice and like answering the questions that you're trying to do. So if you practice it a little bit ahead of time, it just like goes faster when you're actually in the session with her. But that was largely the prep work.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, would you mind sharing what your intention was going into the session?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, yes. I mean, we've talked
You guys
about
are into
like
it.
dating and relationship stuff. I still had like, I've had some like blockages around intimacy my whole life, I would say. And I think we've explored this topic. I think a lot of it does come from like cultural upbringing of like views around sex, taboo, blah, blah, blah. I think that has a big impact, but I was like, I wonder if there's more here. Like maybe it's not just a me in this life thing. Maybe there is like kind of recurring stuff that hopefully I can remove. So that was like the main topic for me is like I didn't know for sure if there was anything. It was just like if there is something, let's like nix that shit because I don't need more shit dragging me down. So that was my main theme.
Makes sense. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Would you walk us through what the actual session is like?
Yeah, yeah, it's actually quite interesting because you can find out all of this on YouTube and like on many people's who do this as websites and stuff. It's like almost not a secret. Like this stuff sounds so like mysterious and like behind a veil, but they actually just tell you straight up like what's going to happen and it's not a secret. So essentially, you go in and you sit in this like very comfortable lazy boy recliner chair essentially because they just want you to be like as relaxed as possible. You're wearing an eye mask just like you would with psychedelics because you're trying to turn inward, right? And the first, I would say probably 30 minutes or so, 30 to 45 minutes, well, my hypnotherapist was a woman, so she was just kind of like guiding me through relaxing myself and essentially hypnotizing me. But like, you can think of it as just like a guided meditation almost, because she was basically like, okay, now like, get comfortable and like, um, she had specific things where it was like, I think the first step is she asks you to picture like one of your favorite places, like somewhere that makes you really happy, and like really visualize yourself being there. And then I think she does like other things while you're in this happy place to like make sure you get like really immersed in it. So she'll ask you like, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? Like, so like for me, I was imagining like the beach. So then I was like, oh, once I'm like really in it enough, I'm like, okay, I can like hear some seagulls and like feel the wind and like whatever, right? So like really trying to immerse you. And then once you're immersed enough that you can kind of like pick up on all these little details, then slowly she has you visualize like going down some stairs and coming upon a hallway. And this hallway is kind of like leading you into your past lives. And so once you're in the hallway, she would ask, like, how many doors do you see? And the number of doors would be like the number of past lives that we would likely explore in that session. And it's not leading. Like, she's not like, oh, do you see 4 doors or whatever? It's like, you should be seeing some doors. How many are there? And for me, I saw 3. And a lot of times she's just kind of asking you questions. So she was like, okay, 3 doors. How many on the left? How many on the right? And I would tell her. And then she'd be like, okay, which one feels like the first one that you want to go to? And I would be like, okay. Like, oh, something she told me too was like, just rely on your intuition the entire time. Like whatever gut feeling you have or like the small little voice in your head, just like don't ignore it. Anything you feel, any thought you have, just say it and do it because that is your intuition like kind of guiding you through it. So I was like, okay, the left door and like whatever. Oh, also, I'll mention this for the woo woo peeps is before we like went into any lives, she did do this thing where she like called upon my guides, my spirit guides, to come and like protect me and like help guide me through whatever I was gonna see and go through. I believe that stuff, so I was like, great. But if you don't believe that stuff, whatever, just entertain it, right? But yeah, so then we went through each door, and it was actually quite interesting because then once you open the door. Yeah, she would ask things like, what kind of door is it? Like, what does it look like? What material is it made of? And like, what feeling do you get from it? Because actually the first door that I got, I was like, I felt immediately like very scared. Like I started shaking. My whole body started shaking. And I was like, there's something scary behind this door. And like, I I don't know what's gonna come from this. Versus like other doors, I was like, oh, this feels like fine. I don't get any like certain sense from it, and or my I had three, right? So my third one, I was like, oh, this feels fun, or like whatever. Like there's just like you'll get certain feelings about what that experience might be, and then when you open the door, you essentially are like entering the body of that past life. I think for everyone it's a little different. Like she was asking me like, well, are you like in the body now? And I was like, I don't really think so, because from kind of from like my point of view. So like you might visualize, or you might just hear, sense things, know things. Everyone's different. I was kind of visualizing, like kind of like when you dream, the amount of visuals you get with a dream. So I was visualizing like trying to enter a body, but I was still kind of like above the body. So it was almost like if you believe and imagine that like my soul was the thing that was kind of like going through these doors, right? It was kind of like my soul was like, I'm not totally ready to just like splat into this body. I'm gonna like hang out up top. So I was kind of like half in, half out, and just like, that's fine. Like if that's like where you're comfortable, let's do that. So everyone's a little different, but that's kind of how I experienced it.
Cool. That sounds really interesting. I actually, what you're talking about transitions perfectly into my next question, which is like, what is the sensation of seeing a past life? Because you're not like fully unaware of your physical surroundings, right? Or are you?
Um, you're not unaware, you're just not focused on it. You're
Hmm.
actually completely aware of everything. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like the debunking is like a lot of people think they were like gonna be manipulated or
Right.
like easily controlled or have someone plant like bad ideas in your head or whatever if you're under hypnosis, but you're fully aware of everything. Like I heard her voice, I knew exactly what was happening, and I could stop at any moment. Like she even was like, if you have to pee, tell me because you're gonna be aware that like you need to pee. Is more that everything else happening around, I just tune it out because we're focused on like this activity that's happening right now. So what I felt, I mean, it was kind of similar to psychedelics in that a lot of things you just like feel the emotion of like what is happening, or you know something to be true without someone telling it to you or whatnot. And so a lot of these experiences, that was kind of what I was going through. But the way that the sessions worked was basically like she would ask me questions to help me. And maybe that was because it was like my first time, so I didn't really know what I was doing. Because I would basically like drop into these bodies, and then she'd be like, what do you see? And I'd tell her, and then I'd have like nothing. And then she'd be like, okay, like what else? Like she's trying to like pull from what I'm experiencing so that we actually get to something. Um, because I think without the guidance, I would have just kind of been like, I don't know what I'm doing now. Like, what's going on? Yeah.
Got it. Um, so then maybe backtracking, because you were talking that you had like three doors and like one was really scary. What were maybe some of the difficult aspects about doing this? Like, did you encounter anything that was like weird or scary, or you found it hard to relax?
Yeah, well, I think it's two things. One was just like knowing what to do. So that's kind of what I was saying about like without her kind of guiding me, I was kind of just like stuck where I was like, what am I supposed to be looking at? Like it would be like, okay, I'm wearing this dress and like I see my shoes and like blah blah blah, but like what else is there? So knowing what to do once you're in there is kind of like question mark question mark. So thankfully she was there to with questions to shape it. The other part was definitely like similar to just any self growth thing. So like with psychedelics or whatever, like I said, that first one was scary, right? Like you feel this sense of dread of like there's some shit that I need to face and I'm scared to face it and I don't know what it is, but I'm like terrified. So that was really difficult, especially because that was my first door that we went through, was a scary one. So I was kind of like, what is it gonna be? And almost like I don't want to do it, but like if you're already in it, you have to just like be willing to explore it, right? So it was more like initially getting past that huge sense of dread of like what's in store. If I already feel that there's something kind of like not pleasant behind this.
That makes sense. They say the only way out is through. Yeah. So, did you learn anything from doing this past life regression?
I did. I learned many things. I
Hmm.
mean, yeah, I think
Maybe like your top three takeaways, things that were either things that are like you're taking with you to your current self or things that you're like, oh, I really didn't expect to have that kind of experience or self or something like that.
I did find that there were like a few things that happened in the past that have an influence on like why I have blockages in current day. Um, I'll keep it vague for the one that I just feel is like too, it was just like too much. But one of them was like essentially, it was like very long ago. I was in like medieval times or whatever, was like, that was the first one. And essentially, I had a stillborn child. And so, and then I like, this is like so dark. I died of grief essentially shortly after the baby died. So I think that like that trauma would be traumatic enough for probably any woman to kind of have like challenges with intimacy and want, you know, essentially getting having any opportunity of getting pregnant and blah blah blah. So that was very unexpected because I was like I would not have like pegged that as something to have happened because you know I as much as I believe this kind of stuff, I'm still a skeptic. I'm still like, I don't know, like I'm probably like I watch too many movies and like I'm like planting, you know, typical scenarios in my brain and then my, you know, my session's gonna like splurt out this like very generic incident that happened and that's the reason. And this was just like, oh, I would not have expected this to have been like something my brain would come up with. So it was more believable to me because I was like, why would I come up with that? That's like the least related to like my current life and like something I would fear. So yeah, that was really interesting because I was like, oh, that it connects kind of like where I'm headed now because with the psychedelics and whatever, like part of the identity changing is that like in the next in the or in the forthcoming years, right, we're gonna move into like creating a family, and like then my identity will shift because I'll eventually move into like motherhood as like part of my identity, right? And so it was pretty interesting to see one life kind of like directly tied to where I'm trying to enter soon, as the next stage in my life, and some like past trauma that is related to that that might also be part of why I have some like qualms with becoming a mother and like having yeah blah blah blah. Anyways, so that was really interesting. And then the other one that was more directly tied with like my question around intimacy was also similar in terms of like I was skeptical that my brain was just going to fabricate like a stereotypical situation. And it was interesting in that essentially there was a trauma that happened when I was a child where it didn't happen to me, it happened to my mother, but I witnessed it as a child. And so it had like a really deep, long
In this life,
lasting
in the past life.
in a different past life. Yeah, so I had three past lives. One was that medieval one. This is a second one, um, and because I witnessed it as a child, I think I was like probably like 5 or 6 years old in that past life when I witnessed this like very traumatic situation happen to my mom. It had left a really deep imprint on me in that life, and then I suppose carried over into like my current life in at least some fashion.
Mm.
And so yeah, that one was really interesting because it's like, okay, that seems to tie more directly with like some of the challenges that I currently have around that topic. Ooh, sorry. Around that topic. And again, because it was not like the stereotypical scene I would have picked up from a movie or whatever,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, I more believe this as well. That it didn't happen to me, especially it happened to like someone else, but like someone very close to me and blah blah blah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I want to ask you actually, because I'll do the Oprah twist the knife thing. Not really. How are you dealing with these past traumas, right? Because in our current lives, we're already working really hard to undo
Yeah.
the trauma in the current life. So, how does this slot into, I guess, how you see yourself and your current set of traumas, and how do you plan on dealing with that, or do you see it more kind of as knowledge about yourself rather than something that you're presently dealing with? If that makes sense.
I think it's more the latter, the knowledge of yourself and not something you're presently dealing with. And it's a good question because I asked this of the therapist afterwards too. Is like, what am I supposed to do with this? Right. And she was like, she was like, honestly, most of the time, just knowing that those things are like kind of the root of some of your blockages usually helps alleviate a lot of those blockages. But she was like, if you're still feeling stuck, it means that there was more to be had there that we just didn't like get to. Because she was like, sometimes I have people who like come in with certain issues and like they have one session and they're like completely unblocked because it was like very clear what the like one thing was. And she was like, other people, they feel like partially unblocked and then they have to come back for like return sessions because there were more lives that dealt with like a similar thing. I think I'm more in the latter of like I realized some things that like lifted some things, but I was still like, I'm not like cured, you know. But I think one thing that did carry into like present life that helped it in my mindset was that one about the like the childbirth related one. It was a very sad situation, but like one really pleasant thing that came out of it was like because she was asking me all these questions, right? Of like how do you feel and like what happens next and blah blah blah. And one of the like very complicated emotions I was feeling during that life was like even though I'm like extremely sad about this child being lost immediately, I felt this like deep, deep love for this child that I had not felt before in current life, right? So, like, it kind of gave me a glimpse into kind of that unconditional, like, immense love that everyone talks about that a mother has for their child that you don't know, that you'll never feel until you have that child, kind of thing. And so it gave me that preview into like that's possible and that you like will feel this type of love for your children when you have your own children in like this life. And so that did help me in kind of current life now because I am going to be entering that stage in the nearish future because, you know, and I think we've talked about we had the kids episode and whatever like I don't have this like maternal instinct in me that I like when I see a baby, I'm like, I love babies and like I feel ready. You know, like that's just not who I am. So I think feeling that in that past life and like being in that state where I just like know the emotions are real, it did help me calm myself a little bit about the like reservations I have, I guess, about becoming a mother soonish. Because I'm like, well, there's that like really bright light at the end of that tunnel of like you're gonna feel this thing that you've like never felt before that will be worth it to become a mother.
Since this is a uptick, shall we move into the fortune cookie? Because we
Yes,
always like
yes,
to end on a sweet treat. Okay, cool.
indeed.
So I wanted to ask you, what was the most interesting and or amusing vision of your past life that you had? I'm hoping that door number 3 had something amusing or
Uh,
interesting. Didn't you say I was like your daughter or something?
Yes. Okay. Yes, that is a way better thing to end on. Yes. Okay. So actually, so that does remind me of a subtopic that we didn't get to, which is when you have like a traumatic life that ends traumatically. Something that your hypnotherapist can do is rewrite the life for you so that you feel more at peace with that life. So like whether you believe it or not, what's happening there, like I think you can have many debates about this because theoretically, and like the way most people think about time, right? It's like past, present, future. It's like the past is past, it's gone. You can't do anything about it. But if you are more on the woo woo side, and also if you lean into like, for example, what's that movie with Matthew McConaughey in space and stuff? Interstellar. If you're into Interstellar or that book series Three Body Problem and all that stuff, it's like space time continuum, right? Like then you may be more inclined to believe that time is all relative and like it's all happening at once and blah blah blah. So theoretically in that world you could rewrite something in the past because past, present, future all kind of the same thing. Anywho's. So in the childbirth one, where it was very sad, she was like, "We're gonna rewrite this so that you like are in a better place." And so she was like, "What do you see? Like, let's pretend that you don't like the worst doesn't happen. So like your child doesn't die, and like you don't then die out of grief and whatever. So like, what does happen?" And so in this version, my child grew up and like became this wonderful daughter who like was really, a go-getter and like loved riding horses and like went off to study school, like what left home to study school and whatever, and I was so proud of her, blah blah blah. And one of the questions she asked before she wrapped up the life was like, okay, take a look at your daughter and your husband. Do you recognize the souls of either of these people? And you were my daughter, yeah. Yeah, I was like, that's
Oh
Jessie.
wait, that's so funny. I mean, also like, oh, touching.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's you can kind of interpret it two ways, right? Like theoretically, if this is like the rewritten life, technically
yeah.
you weren't. Or like maybe you were that stillborn daughter. But whether or not you believe this rewritten life, the fact that I saw you was something really like it made me feel really good because it was kind of
Oh,
like, oh, we're like connected in like
yeah.
this like soul spiritual realm of things, right? That's what I believe. Obviously, you and I are different ends of the woo woo spectrum, but like super woo, if you're all bought in on woo, belief is that we're all souls and that our like true selves are these souls and we reside between lives or we reside in this like soul world unattached to human bodies and you move through the soul world with your soul group of like other souls on your like kind of similar level of development and you incarnate with each other to like play different roles in each other's lives to help you learn whatever lessons that you're supposed to be learning in that life. So the fact that I saw you just like made me really happy because I was like, oh, so we do have like a bigger, a deeper connection than like a one-off stranger kind of thing that like is you're just in passing in this life but won't see you again.
Oh,
So yeah.
I'm sure we will. Wait, I'm curious. What age was that life in?
Oh,
I,
medieval. It was medieval times.
oh, interesting. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I got to go to school. I must have been really smart.
I know,
As a lady?
right? Uh-huh,
Oh,
exactly. That's why I was so proud of you.
that's amazing.
Yes.
Well, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this interview with Angela. I feel like all the interviews with Angela have been very, very interesting. So please write us in. Let us know if you have any questions, if you've done a similar experience, if you have other
Oh,
similar
true.
experiences you'd like to recommend Angela. I'm sure she'd be willing to try as our
Probably.
resident. You're our resident try gal for these things.
True.
So write us in at telluswhereyou'refrom at gmail.com or DM us on the socials.
Yes. And if you believe nothing of what I say, I hope you enjoyed this nice bedtime story of fantastical things that you've heard.
Amazing. All right.
Years.
And we'll be back next week with another fresh new episode for you. And until then,
再见,
再见,
bitches.
bitches.